Welcome to Klepper's Corner. Today in history, June 24th edition. June 24th. You probably think it's just another day to forget your friend's birthday or realize your HOA dues are late. But this day is stacked, absolutely stacked, with more history than a founding father's diary and fewer questionable wigs. From medieval battlefield victories to modern legal body slams, today isn't just a date. It's a time capsule crammed with sword fights, revolutions, canceled albums, constitutional collapses, and a tennis match so long it outlived 3 Apple iOS updates. So buckle up, grab your emotional support falcon, and prepare for a wild ride through the chaotic, brilliant, and occasionally WTF history of June 24th. Because this is Klepper's Corner, where dates matter. Context is everything, and sarcasm is historically inevitable. Segment 1. June 24th, 1314. Battle of Bannockburn. Scotland says, "We're good, thanks." Today in history, we begin with a classic underdog story, the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. Scottish King Robert the Bruce beat back the English army, led by King Edward II, securing Scotland's independence. Think Braveheart, but with more facial hair and fewer historically accurate kilts. This was the medieval equivalent of David versus Goliath, except David was wearing plaid and Goliath was asking for directions out of a bog. Edward II underestimated the Scottish terrain, the Scottish warriors, and apparently the basic concept of a spear wall. Bruce's victory didn't just win a battle, it won a national identity and 700 years of animated Pixar movie adaptations. Segment 2. 1497. John Cabot spots North America. Land ho, probably. In 1497, Italian explorer John Cabot, sailing under the English flag, became the first European since the Vikings to spot North America. It was a huge discovery, assuming you ignore all the people already living there. Cabot's trip was part of Europe's tradition of discovering things that already existed. A fun little hobby they had. Cabot likely landed on the coast of what is now Canada, which is why we now associate maple syrup and overly polite customs agents with imperial ambition. This moment marks the beginning of centuries of exploration, colonization, and awkward land treaties scribbled in crayon. Segment 3. 1509. Henry VIII gets crowned. Till divorce do us part. 1509, a simpler time, when all you needed to be king was a crown, a horse, and complete control over everyone's marriage status. Henry VIII was crowned on June 24th and immediately began what historians refer to as a very weird phase. Henry's reign gave us the Church of England, 6 wives, and a lot of courtroom drama that would put daytime soap operas to shame. His coronation kicked off the most dramatic reality show before Bravo TV, The Real Monarchs of Tudor England. Segment 4. 1675. King Philip's War begins. The land grab gets bloody. June 24, 1675 marked the beginning of King Philip's War, when tensions over land between English colonists and the Wampanoag exploded into violence. After 50 years of shaky peace, it turns out colonialism wasn't a sustainable friendship model. This war showed that European settlers' habit of buying land with beads and broken promises would not go unanswered. King Philip's War was one of the bloodiest per capita conflicts in American history, and a preview of just how messy Manifest Destiny would get. Segment 5. 1717. The first Masonic Grand Lodge. Secret handshakes begin. On this day in 1717, 4 Masonic lodges in London got together and said, "You know what this drinking club needs? Bylaws." Thus, the first Masonic Grand Lodge was born. Freemasonry became the go-to secret society for everyone from George Washington to conspiracy theorists with YouTube channels. Sure, they promise charity and brotherhood, but we all know what people really want. Those weird triangle symbols and secret doors that lead to nothing but awkward conversations about symbolism. Segment 6. 1793. France adopts Constitution. Liberty, equality, breadline. In 1793, France decided that monarchy was so last season and adopted its first Republican Constitution. It was bold, radical, and lasted roughly as long as a TikTok trend before the reign of terror took over. The document declared universal male suffrage, liberty, and a friendly welcome to any nation that wanted to ditch their tyrants. Too bad most people didn't get to vote on how they were executed. Still, the French Revolution gave the world many things: democracy, the metric system, and bread that's socially acceptable to carry under your arm. Segment 7, 1812. Napoleon invades Russia. Big mistake? Huge. In 1812, Napoleon, having conquered most of Europe, looked at Russia and thought, why not? It turns out there are a lot of reasons why not. Napoleon marched 500,000 men into Russia. By the time he retreated, only about 10% were left. He learned the hard way that Russian winters don't care how many medals you have on your chest. The invasion was the turning point in Napoleon's career, specifically the turn from emperor of everything to where's Napoleon now? Segment 8, 1821, Battle of Carabobo. Venezuela breaks up with Spain. Simón Bolívar scored a huge win in Venezuela's independence war at the Battle of Carabobo in 1821. This wasn't just a military victory. It was the historical equivalent of hitting unsubscribe on 300 years of colonial spam. The win meant freedom for Venezuela and a boost for the wider Latin American independence movement. Bolívar became the George Washington of South America if George Washington had better hair and fewer wooden teeth. Segment 9, 1859, Battle of Solferino. Red Cross is born. On June 24, 1859, after the bloody Battle of Solferino, Swiss businessman Henry Dunant looked around and said, maybe we should do something about all these dying people. And just like that, the Red Cross was born. The carnage inspired the creation of a neutral humanitarian aid group that would later win Nobel Prizes, change international law, and basically put a giant Band-Aid on the face of war. It was a shining moment in the middle of a mud-splattered mess. Segment 10, 1880, O Canada debuts. Polite patriotism in song. In 1880, the anthem O Canada was performed publicly for the first time in Quebec. At the time, it was more of a regional jam for French Canadians, but it slowly snowballed into the national theme song of politeness, curling, and existential debates about poutine. It took 100 years to officially become the national anthem, which for Canada is basically overnight. The song continues to unite the country in singing, "We stand on guard for thee," even if they still apologize while doing it. Segment 11, 1896, Booker T. Washington honored. Harvard has a moment. In 1896, Booker T. Washington became the first black man to receive an honorary degree from Harvard. In the middle of the Jim Crow era, this was a mic drop moment for American academia. Washington used the platform to promote cooperation between black and white Americans because he was a class act like that. It was a powerful moment of recognition in a time when that kind of recognition was about as common as a non-racist senator from Mississippi. Segment 12, 1901, Picasso's first exhibition. 18-year-old drops weird shapes on Paris. June 24th, 1901, 18-year-old Pablo Picasso opened his first art exhibit in Paris. The reviews were, let's say, underwhelmed. One critic called it passable. Another said, it looks like my cat did this while dizzy. Picasso would later co-found Cubism and redefine art itself, which just proves that art critics, like weather forecasters, can be wrong in hilarious ways. Picasso's debut is a reminder that sometimes genius walks in wearing mismatched socks and people just need a decade or two to catch up. Segment 13, 1922, NFL is born. Touchdowns and trademark lawyers. On June 24th, 1922, the American Professional Football Association renamed itself the NFL. That was the moment football stopped being a side hustle for steelworkers and started becoming a billion-dollar excuse to sell nachos. They figured if you're going to have concussions, might as well have consistent branding. The NFL would go on to conquer Sundays, inspire endless fantasy leagues, and produce more commercials per minute than actual football. Segment 14, 1932, Siam's bloodless revolution. Absolute monarchy gets ghosted. In 1932, the People's Party in Siam, now Thailand, decided monarchy was so 19th century, so they overthrew King Prajapati without firing a single shot. It was the first revolution where nobody had to dry clean their uniforms afterward. They just handed the king a document and said, "You're now symbolic," which is polite coup speak for "please sit quietly while we change everything." Segment 15, 1939. Siam becomes Thailand, a name you can chant. Just 7 years after the bloodless revolution, Siam went through a little rebranding phase and emerged as Thailand, because nothing screams modern nation state like a fresh name and a logo update. Thailand literally means land of the free, which is what you get when your country's the only one in Southeast Asia that didn't get colonized. It was a power move, like changing your Twitter handle after finally dumping colonial baggage. Segment 16, 1940. France signs armistice with Italy, because losing twice is fun. In 1940, France, already surrendering to Germany, decided to spread the love and signed an armistice with Italy too. Italy, who had entered World War II about 15 minutes earlier, got to nibble on southeastern France. It was like losing a chess match, then handing your lunch money to the guy who just sat down. The occupation zone was modest, but Mussolini still popped champagne. Unfortunately, it was corked with reality. Segment 17, 1947. Kenneth Arnold sees UFOs. Aliens are just weather balloons on steroids. On June 24, 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing flying objects zooming across the sky near Mount Rainier. He described them as moving like saucers skipping on water, and America promptly lost its mind. Thus began the era of flying saucers, X-Files, and family reunions, ending in alien abduction debates. Whether Arnold saw aliens or just really ambitious frisbees, we owe him for launching 75 years of tinfoil hat fashion. Segment 18, 1948. Berlin blockade begins. Stalin throws a tantrum. The Cold War was heating up, and Stalin decided to block West Berlin from receiving food, fuel, and Twinkies. In response, the U.S. launched the Berlin Airlift, which sounds like a wrestling move, but was actually 277,000 flights of humanitarian aid. It was a logistical mic drop that kept the West fed and made Stalin look like a grumpy HOA president. West Berlin survived, East Berlin glared, and NATO probably had a celebratory schnitzel. Segment 19, 1964. FTC declares war on cigarettes. Sort of. On June 24, 1964, the FTC said, hey, maybe people should know that inhaling tar might not be ideal. They ordered warning labels on cigarette packs starting the following year. Tobacco companies weren't thrilled. They lobbied, negotiated, and ended up with warning labels so small you needed a microscope and a legal degree to understand them. Segment 20. 1970, Talkin' Revolution repealed. Congress finally says oops. In 1970, the U.S. Senate repealed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, the legislation that had basically let the president turn Vietnam into a really depressing fireworks show. It was like giving a teenager car keys and then being surprised when the garage explodes. The repeal was Congress's way of saying, sorry about all that war, our bad. Segment 21. 1973, upstairs lounge fire, tragedy, and silence. In 1973, an arsonist set fire to the upstairs lounge, a gay bar in New Orleans. 32 people died. At the time, most of America met the news with a cold shrug. It was the deadliest attack on the LGBTQ community in U.S. history, until Orlando. For years, this tragedy was forgotten, ignored, or erased. Today, we remember it not only for the lives lost, but for the silence that followed. Silence, too, can be a weapon. Segment 22. 1982, Chinatown garment strike. Seamstresses say nah. On June 24, 1982, over 20,000 garment workers, mostly Asian American women, stormed the streets of New York City demanding fair contracts. With signs in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Sass, they brought the city to a halt. These were immigrant women, moms and grandmas, who turned needle and thread into tools of protest. They didn't just sew pants. They stitched themselves into American labor history. Segment 23, 1983, Sally Ride lands, one giant leap for womankind. In 1983, Sally Ride returned from space aboard the Challenger, becoming America's first female astronaut to complete a mission. NASA finally realized women could survive in orbit without bursting into tears or baking muffins in zero gravity. It took 20 years after the Soviets to get there, but hey, who's counting? Ride proved that women belong wherever the view is spectacular and the math is terrifying. Also, she inspired about 1 million Halloween costumes involving aviator sunglasses and courage. Segment 24. 1993. Unabomber strikes Yale. Explosions, not exams. June 24th, 1993, Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, sent a bomb to Yale professor David Gelenter. Because if there's one thing we learned from the 90s, it's that nothing says intellectual discourse like explosives in the mail. Kaczynski was a one-man war against modernity, proving that if you take isolation, genius, and rage and stir vigorously with manifestos, you get something terrifying and wildly outdated, like fax machines, but lethal. Segment 25. 1995, South Africa wins Rugby World Cup. Mandela's mic drop. South Africa beat New Zealand in a nail-biting Rugby World Cup final, but the real win was seeing Nelson Mandela in a Springbok jersey hand the trophy to a white captain in a stadium of thunderous unity. It was a moment that said, we've been through hell, but maybe, just maybe, we can throw a ball around and start to heal. Proof that sometimes the fastest route to reconciliation is a good ruck and a handshake. Segment 26. 1997, Disney cancels ICP. Mickey Mouse doesn't like clowns. In 1997, Disney-owned Hollywood Records dropped Insane Clown Posse the day their album launched. Apparently, songs about murder clowns didn't align with The Happiest Place on Earth. Turns out Disney was okay with haunted mansions and villain songs, but not Detroit rappers rhyming about hatchets. So ICP went from Magic Kingdom to Parental Advisory in record time. The album still sold like flaming hot Faygo. Segment 27. 2002, Tanzania train tragedy. Brakes, be gone. June 24, 2002, Tanzania saw Africa's worst train disaster when a passenger train's brakes failed on Igandu Hill. Over 280 lives were lost, infrastructure failed, oversight failed, humanity paid the fare. It's a brutal reminder. Trains don't just carry passengers, they carry trust. And when that breaks, the cost is measured in funerals, not tickets. Safety, it turns out, is never a luxury. Segment 28. 2010, Julia Gillard becomes Aussie PM. Crikey, it's a woman. Australia, meet your first female prime minister. On June 24, 2010, Julia Gillard took the top job with no election. Just classic Aussie drama, political backstabbing, late-night deals, and shrimp on the Barbie. Gillard broke the glass ceiling, then vacuumed it up herself, because that's just how it is when you're the first. She faced misogyny with poise, grit, and maybe a few scathing speeches that still echo through Canberra. Segment 29. 2010 tennis match breaks time. Isner v. Mahut forever. John Isner beat Nicholas Mahut in a tennis match that lasted 11 hours and 5 minutes, over 3 days. At some point, ball boys aged into ball men. This wasn't tennis. It was an endurance test set in a polite gladiator arena. Afterward, the scoreboard retired and entered therapy. The ATP changed rules. Wimbledon sighed in relief. Both players became honorary tortoises. Segment 30. 2015, Johar Tsarnaev sentenced. Justice in the age of terror. In 2015, the Boston Marathon bomber was sentenced to death. Tsarnaev's trial was America's reckoning with one of the darkest chapters in modern domestic terrorism. He was young, radicalized, and deadly. The sentence sparked debate over justice, mercy, and the death penalty in an age of fear. One thing is certain, no verdict can fill the void left behind on Boylston Street. Segment 31. 2018, Saudi women drive Start Your Engines. On June 24, 2018, Saudi Arabia lifted its ban on women driving because nothing says progress like catching up to 1899. This was a milestone for gender rights in one of the world's most restrictive societies. After decades of campaigning and arrests, Saudi women could finally get behind the wheel legally. Sure, it took a crown prince, an image overhaul, and an international PR blitz, but still, freedom honked its horn. Segment 32, 2021, Champlain Towers collapse. Concrete failure, systemic cracks of stemic rapidement. In 2021, a Florida condominium partially collapsed, killing 98 people. It was one of the worst structural failures in U.S. history and a nightmare for anyone who's ever trusted a building inspection. Years of ignored warnings, salt air, and bureaucratic delays created the perfect storm. The tragedy revealed that even beachfront views come with hidden costs, and sometimes they're paid in lives. Segment 33, 2022, Roe v. Wade overturned. 50 years, gone in 6-3. June 24th, 2022. The Supreme Court in Dobbs v. Jackson overturned Roe v. Wade. That's right, after nearly 50 years, abortion rights became a state-by-state coin toss. It was a judicial earthquake that shook the political landscape and launched a new era of protests, bans, and confusion. Depending on where you live, your reproductive rights now depend on whether your state flag has a snake, a bear, or a Bible on it. Segment 34, Today in History. Conclusion, what June 24th teaches us. So what do we make of June 24th? A battle for freedom in Scotland, an arson attack in New Orleans, a woman driving in Riyadh, a constitutional right lost in D.C. It's a date that refuses to stay in one lane. From revolutions to rugby, breakthroughs to breakdowns, it gives us a kaleidoscope of human struggle, ambition, violence, and hope. History doesn't play favorites, it just happens. And if June 24th proves anything, it's that the past is never done with us. It whispers, yells, crashes, and occasionally flies by in a saucer. So buckle up, mark your calendars, and maybe, just maybe, take the stairs.